everyone, just wanted to hop on and say that this episode was filmed early summer of 2022. We hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching.
Welcome to the Bergstrom Bunch podcast. I'm here again with my son Caleb.
How's it going?
Hey, pretty good. So today we're going to talk about creativity and imagination. And so I got to start with this. When you were young, it was pretty much a daily occurrence that you would come up to me and say, "Hey, Dad, that would be cool if," and then followed by something cool. That would be cool if dinosaurs were still alive. "Hey, Dad, that would be cool if this minivan could fly or turn into a submarine." And so you just had this fantastic imagination, always thinking of new things.
Yeah, well, I didn't expect you to bring me down memory lane like that immediately, but I do remember I would draw little schematics for you, and I'd even put a materials list, like for a car I wanted you to build, and the materials list was probably like 3 items. It was like board, screws, and wheels.
Oh, yeah.
And I figured that's all you needed to make a car, but it turns out it wasn't. I tried to convince you. I was like, we don't have to like make it drive. It just needs to be able to go down a hill. And I completely misunderstood, I think, how much goes into that process.
Yeah. Well, so it's natural that you'd think of wood because we had this mutual love for Home Depot.
That's true.
And you especially because you got to watch the forklifts operate.
Yeah.
But I always love just meandering through Home Depot, and you see all this different wood and moldings and hardware, and I just thought of, man, what could I build with this stuff, and what could I do in my house with this stuff, and it's just kind of how my brain works.
Yeah, I think I loved Home Depot mostly because I went there with you, and there was always a project we were doing when we went there. Like, it was the precursor to something happening. I think that was the main reason I loved going there, because sitting there and waiting most of the time wasn't fun for me. And I remember hating Lowe's because one time we went there and we had to wait like 50 minutes for a forklift to come and get the lumber we needed. Even though that could literally happen at any of those stores, it just happened to be that day, and so I...
Do you still have that disdain for Lowe's? Like
No.
Okay.
Actually, no, because the materials they have there are pretty great, and we have a Lowe's right by our gym, which we go to all the time.
Oh, yeah, we spent a lot of money there.
Yeah, they're pretty handy.
So, my creativity comes a lot in just working with my hands and building things. That's something I'm hardwired that way. As far back as I could remember, I'd borrow my dad's tools, and I remember making boats out of pine tree bark, which is horrible building material, but I had this flotilla in the tub, and I just remember it being a mess. But I would also take his hammer and any lumber and build tree houses. I was like 7 years old. I don't know how we didn't die in these tree houses with just little nails stuck into stuck into the tree. Yeah. Totally unsafe. I mean, no lags, just anything I could hammer in, probably some nails I had to straighten out, and then we climbed and we played in them. And
well, when we built a tree house together too, and it was a lot more sturdy than that.
I'd learned a few things
over
the decades, yeah.
I almost died when we built that. I actually almost fell out of it, but I had such a big head I was able to land on a branch without falling.
Perfect.
That's a different story, kind of a sidebar.
We added railing. It got safe-ish, so yeah. But I see that you're very creative in movements and in coaching. You're very creative in ninja coaching, but there's so many times I've seen you create a movement. I'm thinking specifically of ninja training, and then other students around the U.S. start posting Caleb Bergie challenge, and it's the coffin lache, it's the giant on the salmon ladder, and people may not know what those things are, but it's a new way of doing something that people hadn't thought of before. But you thought of it, and then people around the country mimic you. Right. It was creative. It was unique.
Well, and some of those things like are movements that have been around for a long time, and I just coined it or something, my buddies and I called it a coffin lache one time, and we started doing it from bar to bar, but gymnasts have done it from low bar to high bar for a long time, female gymnasts. It's just a little different the way we're doing it in the ninja community because we're not doing gymnastics, so it like presents itself as a new idea, even though it's just a creative way to use a movement that's been around for a long time. So I think my creativity as a kid started off just by trying to get out of working hard. Like I was very creative with like, we had to move a lot of branches, huge wood piles, especially when Hurricane Ike came through, and we had to, there were so many trees that fell down, and then we had a mission of like getting rid of every single sweet gum tree that was on our property.
Oh yeah.
And so I would like I wouldn't do the project until I could figure out a creative way to get it done. Like, I'd create sleds out of branches and pile branches onto those sleds and then use the tractor to pull it to a pile, and then, like, but I wouldn't do the job unless I could figure out a way to get it done easier.
Now, I remember after that, because I didn't care that you kids were young, everyone's got to chip in and help out, but even the little neighbor girls, even little pint-sized Alexa, just the cutest little thing, the girls all had ropes around their waists connected to a pile of branches, and like a sled dog team were pulling these branches to the burn pile. It was very clever, and little Alexa probably could pull 5 pounds worth, but she was out there giving it her all.
I had them all do that. That's funny. Wow.
Were you the taskmaster, or were you pulling? I don't
No,
remember.
I was pulling too.
Okay.
Yeah, I usually led by example. I didn't like making people do things I wasn't going to do.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So a lot of our creativity lately, the last few years, has come out in the gym that we built. And a lot of people, when they come in, they ask me, how did you guys build this? How did you guys think of all this stuff? Because it's not a normal gym. Most of our equipment is built out of wood, and it has a jungle theme, and so there's a lot of unique elements. It's something that, especially if you've not been in a ninja gym before, you come in and like, wow, this is not Crunch Fitness. This is not Anytime. This is a totally different beast. It's not wood, metal equipment. It's wood. It's different. And so people ask, how did you think of all this? And I don't know, you want to speak to kind of how we came up with some of the stuff from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, first off, once again, and some of these ideas have been around for a long time. You know, we copy the show American Ninja Warrior because that's what we're training for. The wing nuts came from Kevin Carbone, not from us. The way we designed the wing nuts, even, we had a wing nut build, and then I sent a video to Kevin, and he was like, no, man, you got to do it some other way. And so we changed the way we did it, and ironically, the way we built it originally is the way, like, later on, like, Kevin actually started selling his wing nuts the way we built them originally, but we won't talk about that. Like, some of the stuff that we originally designed turned out it might be good, but then some of the stuff we originally designed was not very good. It was sharp and very uncomfortable. And so, like, some of those obstacles are other people's design. I think the creativity came in the way we set it up, or even the way we rigged it. And I think a lot of people are creative in the way that they rig things. But just for us, like, I think it just became a process of, like, what movements do we want to do? What are we going to build to do that movement?
Yeah, so there was a lot of imitation. Mom and I visited a good number of ninja gyms before, and as well as you and I, we visited ninja gyms. And every ninja gym I visited, I would take mental notes. I like this, I don't like that. And so there was a lot of imitation and other people we've learned from, like Ninja Quest. I learned a lot from Glenn up there, and just imitation and modification was a big part of it.
Right. And then after imitation came the modification, right? And then we started designing our own obstacles. We started putting them in competition. And another important thing is we presented them. You know, it wasn't like a whole mix of creativity. It was creativity with structure and with a few guidelines behind it. And I think that made it a little more impactful because whenever you just have creativity, it seems just like a mess and your thoughts go all over the place. But then whenever you can structure your creativity and present it as an idea to someone, then that's when people go, oh, wow, like, wow, I just learned something new, or I'm seeing something new for the first time.
So that mess part, I think that's a important piece, because I'll sketch out stuff all the time and then we'll chat about it. I always run it by you because you know better if a movement's going to work, if it's going to be fun, if people are going to want to do it.
Right.
I just spitball ideas. And sometimes after a comp, I mean, you know how much work we put into these competitions, and we're there till late in the night getting set up. We're there all day the next day, just running everything, just exhausted. And it just seems like at the end of the comp, when we're just spent, that's when I have new ideas, and that's when we'll chat and, hey, what do you think about this for the next one?
That's when I want to chat least about your new ideas. Yeah.
We try to keep it brief, but yeah, I don't know. I kind of see how people enjoy something, and it just sparks a new idea. But that messy part of just brainstorming and scribbling, and I've used SketchUp to create stuff, because in SketchUp you can just easily manipulate and move. It's a whole lot easier to move something with a mouse click than actually 4 guys moving a warped wall over. But having a medium, I'll still like paper and pen. But thinking through obstacles we've created, do you have a favorite moment of an obstacle we made and you looked at it and like, yeah, that's working out well. I'm really glad we did that one.
We've done a lot of competitions now, so it's almost like some of the obstacles have been lost in the mix from new ones that we've created and things like that. One of them that I really liked was the Indiana Jones one, where you run and you set a trigger that causes this huge ball to roll at you while you do an obstacle, and if the ball knocks you down, you fail the obstacle. Also, if you fall out of bounds doing that, you fail the obstacle. So there were 2 different rules in that one. I liked that one a lot because, once again, it was something we've seen before. But we just made it our own and kind of made a creative version of it with tracks that the ball rolled on and everything. Like it was very hard to design it. There was a lot of work that went into it.
Yeah.
Another one was an obstacle that you and I kind of both thought up. I think it was one I thought up specifically. It was the trapdoor, where you grab a ledge and it opens up and creates something new as you grab it. And we used that a few different times in our competition in different ways, and it had some great results in the comp because it ended the course, and so it got to highlight itself as a very difficult obstacle.
Yeah. So one of my favorites was when we created Backlash, which a lot of people won't know what that is, but basically as you're flying through the air, the obstacle changes position, so you have to aim for where you think it's going to be.
Right.
It's difficult, but we put that in a competition, and afterwards we gave people time, after the competition, time to just play and try anything. And there was a line for an hour and a half straight of people wanting to do the obstacle over and over and over. And I really felt like, man, we really hit the nail on the head with this one because people are enjoying it. It's challenging, yet they can get it if they work on it. And then, ninjas, they're going to think of, how can I be more creative? How can I do it in a different way? How can I do it in a more difficult way?
Right. Which people did do it more difficult.
Of course.
Than it was intended. And once again, that was not our original obstacle. That was one from American Ninja Warrior. We just made it harder by, instead of using a bar, we used a cliffhanger ledge or just a small piece of wood. You
modify it. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and I want to circle back to imitation in a little bit, but I want to talk about something else that drives creativity, and that's putting a limit on something. All right, so the example that everyone can relate to is the paper is due in 3 hours. You should have done it 2 weeks ago, but now you had to wake up early the day it's due. Yeah, and that's time to really get creative.
That's when I thrive. Yeah, that's when I'm best.
Me too, in some ways.
Yeah, I think I'm a creative procrastinator. Like, I almost... Maybe it's something I've drilled into myself where I can't be creative until it's kind of the last minute, or if I give myself like a deadline to be creative before the last minute. So like if I tell myself, hey, I have to come up with a new idea for our competition 1 month before the competition happens, that's usually a helpful way for me to go about it, because otherwise it just becomes like our first competition, I made stage 3 the day of, and it wasn't the best stage 3 you've ever seen in your life, but it worked, and our goal was only 1 finisher, and we only had 1 finisher, and we did that without rerunning anyone or anything like that.
Good times.
Yeah.
But it helps also to let something ruminate and marinate and just build over time and let the ideas, when you have something in mind, like I need to, and it could be anything, I need to complete this design for a house I'm building, or a paper I'm writing, or a speech I have to give, and you have to kind of have an idea of what direction you're going in. It seems like looking for creativity draws the ideas to you, and you might come across a story, an Instagram post, a picture of something, the way someone else has done, and those things all kind of allow that idea to ruminate and build over time.
Yeah, and I think there's like no specific formula, for that. Like, I think a lot of people understand their creative process and look for areas, like if you take a walk, sometimes that helps. Or even, I've mentioned Kevin, he said most of his ideas came in the shower, just like a time when your brain isn't cluttered with the things you have to do, you're just thinking about what you would like to see in the future, and you're not focused on work at that point in time, you're not focused on your to-do list or your schedule, you're just, if you're in the shower, you're just enjoying the hot water and thinking about obstacles, I guess, in Kevin's case, right?
Yeah, so the idea of kind of unplugging, I mean, in the shower, you're not on your phone.
Right.
Hopefully. You're not on social media. You're not watching TV. You're not listening to music typically. It's just that quiet time where the brain can relax, and those ideas that have maybe been shoved into the subconscious can come up.
Now, I'll confess, I've been on the phone in the shower before.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
No, not actually on the phone, but like I had my phone on the side. I was watching, I think, a podcast, and I was so into it, but I had to shower. I was like, well, I don't have to stop watching this.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was showering and I was watching a podcast.
All right. But so like our last competition, we had an obstacle. Again, we stole it from Indiana Jones, but you had to run, and there was a door with spikes that dropped. And as you caught the first rope, that drop was initiated, and you had to hustle and then slide under before those spikes would land on you. But we had so many problems getting the timing right, getting it consistent. It was so frustrating, and we worked on different ways of resisting it, and we slowed it down, but the timing was different every single time.
Yeah, I actually didn't like the way that one turned out for a lot of reasons. One was that the obstacle leading up to it was so basic, and the foul line for it was an actual line of tape, which I hate. I think the foul line should be upraised from the actual water, as we call it. So that was an issue I had with it, and then the other was how the door was tough to use.
The problem was we were there till 4 a.m. trying, and the competition started at 10. So trying, and I said, you know what, let's just leave. I'll figure it out in the morning. And when I woke up in the morning, just the solution of how to make it consistent came to me. Just again, allowing the brain to rest, getting some sleep, and in the morning, that's when my brain works the best. Some people are evening thinkers, but the solution came to me of how we can at least make it the same for every single competitor, and it worked.
It did work, yeah. It wasn't the best solution. It was manual, but at least we basically had a stopwatch for it, right?
Yeah,
slow it down.
But to sleep on it was so essential.
Right.
So thinking about, like, again, putting limits on something to drive creativity. So if I'm an art teacher and I tell the kids, hey, do art, their brains are going to be all over the place.
Right.
Well, what do you mean? But if I tell them, okay, draw an elephant, then that a limit on what they're supposed to do is going to help them to be creative. Or if I say, look, we're painting landscaping, and everyone has a little block of wood, a 4x4 block of wood you have to paint it on. I placed a limitation, and suddenly I'm allowing creativity to flow, right? So limitations, I think, are a great way. And like you said, putting a deadline. There's projects that I'm working on, big projects, and I haven't had a deadline because it's self-imposed. And some of those things, it's like, well, that can wait, because there's other things that are more important. But the deadline, man, forces you to crank it out. So let's, I want to circle back to imitation, because we would be remiss if we didn't come to the main source of imitation, which is God. And God is so creative. I mean, here's something that blows me away. We just think about like a simple beetle. You look at a beetle, that's a beetle. But there are over 350,000 species of beetles.
That's crazy.
I haven't even seen anywhere near the number of beetles that there are. Why? Why do we need 350,000 species of beetles? 3 would be sufficient. I would think 35 is a lot. But just God's creative that way. Like, why not? If you're infinitely creative, why stop at 350 species? Why not 350,000? Why not all the species of birds and colors and everything that's been given to us? It's pretty wild.
Yeah. So it's almost like, because God is creative, He has designed us to be creative as well.
Yeah. I mean, you look at, that's one of many things that separate us from animals, but you don't see animals creating art and poetry and buildings. I mean, maybe a nest, but a swallow's nest looks like another swallow's nest from around the world. This is an instinct they've been given.
Right.
But we've been given this ability to create something that doesn't exist before, or to modify something, create a new genre of music, to create a new type of art, a new medium, and continue to challenge people. And so I just really think that looking at what God has done helps drive our creativity.
And also, like, our unique creativity as human beings is honestly what what brings us together. Because if we all thought the same way or even had the same instincts, as you mentioned animals do, we would be just as hostile to each other as other animals are, because we don't need those extra inputs. As humans, we kind of want to figure out solutions, and if other people are going to think the same way we do, then they're just extra. Like if you meet people, or if you have a group of people that you go to like an escape room with, you always have like two people who are finding the same clues together. You always have some people who are thinking the exact same way and they're following each other around doing the exact same thing. And then you have other people who are just on the side, like they're doing the small thing, and they happen to find like the one piece of tile that comes up and has a key underneath it. And having all those different people in there who think different ways is actually the way you escape. Like if you just have one person who's ordering everyone around, you're going to lose that creative side, and you're actually going to lose your capability to escape from an escape room. As someone who's done a few of them,
Yeah.
that's kind of the process of learning, is other people doing things that you wouldn't think to do.
So I think when we think of other people, that's one of the most annoying things, is people are different. Why do they think differently? Why, if everyone could think like me, the world would be a much better place.
Right.
If everyone had my skills, but that's actually not the way it works.
Right.
Because the way God said is, you guys are like a body. This is in 1 Corinthians. The Apostle Paul said, you guys should operate like a body, where someone's a hand, someone's an eye, someone's a nose. Everyone does it a little different. But if we can collaborate, right? Same thing with creativity. When we think of limitations as well, kind of looping back, when we built the gym, we did not have the money to just go out and buy everything we needed. And that forced creativity, because we had to figure out, there were 2 sprinkler systems, and we activated the upper one and took apart the lower one, but now we had all this pipe, and we sanded it down and painted it, and we used that pipe for a lot of things. And people look at that and like, yeah, that was sprinkler pipe. And then we built a volcano.
Yeah.
And people ask, why do you have a volcano? It's because again, back to instincts, birds have this nest building instinct, and rabbits have this burrowing instinct. And the only instinct God has given humans, the only instinct we have, is the stay out of hot lava game.
Yeah.
Because I'm convinced, absolutely convinced, by watching you guys when you were young, by watching these other kids in the gym, is that throughout history, every generation, whether they grew up in an igloo, a teepee, a cave, a castle, at some point the parents walked in on the kids who were climbing on the wall, climbing on the dresser, and the parents asked, "What are you doing?" And the kid said, "The floor is lava." I'm convinced that every kid throughout history, absolutely convinced, the floor is lava.
That's a stretch, yeah.
I don't think it's a stretch. Yes, the floor is lava, but how did you know? Because God put it in there.
Yeah. Well, it covers all the instincts, right? It covers survival. It covers finding a safe place. So it covers even provision, because you're staying away from the lava and you have to figure out ways to live outside of the lava section.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we have a volcano, but the volcano was made out of the building before we acquired it was a banquet facility, and they left behind thousands of cloth napkins of every single color, and that's what we built the volcano out of. It's built out of napkins.
Yeah. I got to help that process. It was a great time.
Great time, yeah. But kind of dipping them in cement and kind of paper mache it. Now it's strong. It has a wood structure under it. But yeah, napkins. But is because that's all we had to work with.
Right.
We couldn't afford to just go out and buy I don't know. You could hire someone to build a volcano. There's people that do that type, but we didn't have the money. We had to figure it out, and we were kind of limited.
Yeah, and what's cool is that volcano doesn't have the same like texture or feel that you would find in, like, if you went to a playground that had a volcano.
Yeah, a foam volcano.
Yeah, something like that, right? It feels solid. It feels like a piece of rock. And as part of the person, I wasn't the creative person. I was just the person who dipped the rags in concrete and slapped them on there. But I have this memory of like wet concrete dripping on my face while I was underneath the volcano, kind of like moving rags around and stuff, and it was super cold at the same time. So like, I hated the process of building that thing, but now seeing the volcano and seeing kids rock climb on the inside of it, I remember that process, and I think, wow, that's so cool that like I did that, or at least I was part of that and was able to see these kids have a good time inside of our volcano. It's pretty cool.
Another thing about limitations, if you ever see redneck repairs, right? You're poor, you're limited, but if I had the money, I would have never known. If had I not seen Redneck Repairs, like I would have never thought to rebuild a bumper out of lumber, right? But they do it. Maybe not the best, but hey, I don't have sheet metal. I don't have the fiberglass, but I've got some old pallet lying around. We could rebuild this bumper.
Yeah, you say poor and limited, but sometimes it's not because they're poor or limited, actually. Sometimes they have unlimited amount of junk just sitting around, and maybe it's still being poor. They want to just come up with something. I have even seen the guy who was floating. This one's probably fake, but he was in his own little upraised pool floating around, but then he had a flip-flop that he was floating his power
strip on
the flip flop floating around,
so he didn't get electrocuted.
Yeah, exactly.
Smart, yeah,
brilliant.
Or the guy who his AC apparently went out in his car, and so he strapped a generator to his trunk, and then took a window unit and created a plywood window on the back side of his car and mounted a window AC unit.
Brilliant.
There. Yeah, genius, genius. Who needs a mechanic? He could figure it out.
Yep.
Creativity. So, I guess here's a good question. Can anyone be creative?
Can anyone be creative? I think creativity is something that is the most difficult to teach, right? As a coach, teaching kids how to be creative is very difficult, but everyone has a measure, I think, of creativity in a certain area. Like mine was simply getting out of working. You know, I was very creative. I loved working, but at the same time, I loved to do it in a way that I felt was going to be most efficient. So I was very creative in that. I think when you give people a problem, they can come up with a solution. I think the issue is that problems are solved so quickly nowadays. Like if I, as a kid, didn't have a lunch, I would go and I would scrounge underneath. We'd go to the YMCA and I'd scrounge underneath by the parking lot and I'd find quarters and I'd put them in the vending machine. And I was pretty creative with the ways I would figure out how to get that vending machine
to
give
get that
me
snack.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but nowadays, if a kid forgets food whenever they go out, usually they could just call their mom. And in my case, I could have called my mom, but I was. She
wasn't going to drive you a snack to the
she wasn't going to drive
That
you a
wasn't
snack,
going to
right?
happen. No.
And you know, it's a great thing to have a good mom who will come and drive you a snack, but sometimes that issue causes you to be creative and to learn things. And if the problems are always solved for you
Out of need, yeah.
Yeah, if the problems are always solved for you, you're never actually going to be taught or even learn how to come up with a solution. So creativity, we've said imitation and limitation. It's funny that those two words kind of sound very similar. But then one of the next ones I would say is need, which happens also when you procrastinate and you have a deadline, right? You need to be creative. You need to do something. And that might be the ultimate form of creativity, is whenever you just have no other option but to get
Desperate,
the thing done.
yeah. So what about someone that would say, I want to be more creative? Maybe they design homes, they're an artist, they're a photographer, a musician, building ninja gyms. I want to be more creative. Do we have any insight, any ideas for them?
That's so hard. I would say, first off, unplug. Get away from the things that you always do. If your lifestyle is basically doing the work that you have to do and then going home and sitting on TV or Instagram, I think those things actually limit creativity. I think spending your time where your brain is occupied on someone else's platform is going to limit your creativity. I see some people who learn from Instagram and go on there just to follow accounts that have engineering or even just art accounts and things like that. But even then, you're not necessarily building up your creativity. You're just watching someone else's work.
So there's a big piece to that with kids who always have an electronic in their hand.
Right.
And we're going to see the fruit of that. But the amount of creativity that we have stifled from these kids by allowing themselves to be constantly entertained.
Right.
You were allowed to be bored as a kid. Right?
But too much, yeah.
So I think of you, Kylie, and Caitlin playing baseball. 3 kids, 2 teams.
Yeah.
And so you have a batter, a pitcher, and then you guys worked it creatively, but then the floater is, so I think the pitcher does everything, right? And the fielding. So you might get a base hit. You're on second base, But now you have to go up and bat again. So you have your place an imaginary person on second base, right? Isn't that how you guys did it? And then if you make it a base, your imaginary person also made it a base. Something like, but very creative, right? So it was a lot of fun. Then when you added Danny and a few other siblings to the mix, now you could actually have more than one person on that opposing team. So
that's actually when we added a ton of people. That's when baseball became less fun for us because we actually had to learn. We had to learn actual rules at that point, and we started just doing other things like football was just so much better at that point then because the rules were so much more simple. So yeah, our creativity made us want to keep doing that creative thing. Yeah. Instead of allowing structure to come in, we just had to change sports after that. Tetherball or something. You know?
So when I was young, I wasn't into sports at all, but we couldn't afford the cool toys that I wanted. The ultimate toy I wanted was Voltron, which you got to kind of think Power Rangers. You know, Power Rangers is a total knockoff of Voltron, but it was these 5 robotic tiger cats that would come together and form a robot, right? And so, but there was no way I was ever going to get that, well outside of my parents' Christmas budget with 7 kids. And so I had to make my own out of cardstock paper and little brad thumbtacks and glue, and it probably looked like trash, but in my mind it was pretty awesome. But I had to build my own toys.
And you even mentioned the other day at church the theme park that you made.
Oh yeah,
that you thought was an absolute gem. Yeah, and it just looks like a tower with like a block on top of it, right?
I remember it being awesome, and I saw the picture and like that was trash. But I had to get creative. I had to use paper towel rolls and milk crates and anything I could find to build it.
Well, and I think that's worked long term because you're one of the more creative people I know because while your creativity doesn't stem, I don't think from like colors or seeing like a piece of art and being inspired by that. Your creativity comes from like something that needs to be done, right? Or like a structure that needs to be built. Like you could have almost zero limitation. You could have zero structure based on what needs to happen, and you could make something happen. Like, hey, we need a fence here. So I guess that is limitation. It's a fence. But then you could come up with a materials list in your brain. You could come up with exactly where those fence posts need to be, where the gate needs to be, what latch you're going to use. And that's all a form of your creativity because you have foreknowledge of that thing, right? So the limitation is there, I suppose, but at the same time, you're very creative in just creating different ways for people to see your idea and then different ways for that idea to come to life.
So I would say that's something I've had to train over time.
Okay.
Building things that I would look back on and say, man, that could have been so much better. But then part of it is just meandering through the hardware stores. I've got the materials up here. I know what's available,
right? And
I know what I can do with that. And then also learning from other people. And you know, if I have to build a deck, then I'm going to look at other people's decks. If I have to paint my house, which I did recently, I'm going to look around and see what do I like, what do I not like. I've got to do some landscaping, spruce up the yard, and so I look at other people's yards. What do I like? Palm trees? Do I like oak trees? What do I want to do?
Right.
What looks good, and allow that to soak and marinate and feed in, and it eventually it all just kind of comes out. So just feeding that creativity, and it takes work. It takes work to be creative. But once you put in the work, it just, creativity in, creativity out.
Yeah, and also something that has helped me in being not just more creative, but also more productive in life is figuring out the times in my day when when my brain's working the fastest. I'm the opposite of you. You're a morning person. I'm more of an evening person. Like, whenever it comes to like 10 o'clock at night, my brain's moving fast. I'm thinking a lot of different ideas. That's when competition ideas come into my brain. That's when I'm writing down like the way I'm going to be training and the schedule for my training. That's when I'm up like studying different parts of the human body to make sure that I'm like working the right muscles and even like energy systems and stuff like that. Like, I get excited whenever it's late at night, which makes it hard to sleep sometimes.
So I'm glad you brought that up because I'm reading a book by Carey Nieuwhof called At Your Best, and that's exactly what it's about, having different times of the day and identifying. For me, at 10 o'clock at night, my brain is mush. So Carey would call that a red zone. But 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m. That's my time. That's my green time, right?
Right.
And then there's yellow times where it's like, yeah, that's the time to exercise or something that where your brain's just not rolling. For me, like the afternoon, at 2 o'clock, a little bit after lunchtime, my brain is shot again, and then it'll pick back up.
Right.
But I probably should take a nap. No, I'm not a napper, but the right time of day is so huge, and not allowing that time to be filled up with other things, but taking that creative time and putting some limits around it. Like, no, this is not the time when I'm going to be doing other. This is my creative time. This is the time I need to put energy into that. And when my brain's the sharpest, that is the time of day I'm going to do the heavy brain activities.
Right. And I firmly believe also in like a cognitive bias where like you have this belief consciously that like since I'm good at that time, I'm going to keep being good at that time. Like since my brain is hot at 10 p.m., now I believe my brain's hot at 10 p.m. It's always, going to kind of find that stimulus around that time, or maybe a little earlier than that time. But if you have this belief that you're terrible in the mornings and that your body feels horrible in the mornings, then you're going to wake up and you're going to just believe that. You're going to understand that. And while it's true most of the time, it's not always true. Like I wish I was a morning person, and yet in saying that, I'm already affirming that I wouldn't ever be a morning person. But I think we train ourselves to specific times because of our lifestyle, and then those times our brain understands, like, okay, because I think our brain subconsciously understands that it can't be firing at 100% all the time. That's what sleep is for. That's kind of why our body fluctuates. And so if our brain understands when the time to operate is, it's going to shoot up and operate at that time based on necessity and based on lifestyle. So you love waking up in the morning.
My favorite thing.
Yeah. You feel actually empowered whenever you wake up in the morning, I would say. Because your day starts productive. Your day starts, usually you start your day by reading the Bible and praying.
Yeah.
And then immediately after that, I've seen this. Immediately after that, you are on your to-do list, or you're just getting things done. Whatever needs to be done right after that. You're working out, or just you're doing something. You're not starting your morning slow. You start your morning with the things that you need to do. You get them done early in the day.
Yeah, well, I make sure I have that time in the morning, like you mentioned, my Bible reading, my prayer time, other reading, that's when I do thinking, that's when I do planning, and I carve out that time. I don't allow things to interfere with that morning time of really thinking through whether it's a message for Sunday or what we're going to talk about on a podcast. Like that's my time where my brain's active, where it's really working hard. If I can maximize that time, then I don't need to spend all day thinking about those things. The rest of the day can be for other things that I need to accomplish that aren't as brain heavy. But
yeah.
You really only have a few hours of heavy brain work that your brain is able to do in a day. So why not just knock it out, get it in that time when your brain is firing and ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, and we're not scientists, though. I mean, I think we've both done a lot of study in our own lives of where we are most active mentally, and your brain is a very complex system. And I think one thing I already mentioned is I believe that you can change the way that your body reacts based on what your lifestyle is. But something I've also seen that you do a lot is whenever you wake up in the morning, you have to like stifle the urge to just get up and do things immediately.
Yep.
You're ready. You're so ready that you have to actually force yourself to slow down.
Yep. Let that brain work happen.
And so I think it's important to remember that just because your brain is on doesn't mean you have to immediately go into your process. Sometimes there's stimulation or just things you need to get done that will help you become even more creative or more productive. And so just remembering that, I think this is something that you've taught us a lot, is life is an ebb and a flow. You have to take time to step away. Just like we learned from the lifestyle of Jesus, you take time to step away. Even if things are urgent, you still take time to step away and rest. And then whenever it's time to flow, whenever it's time to get things done, you hop in and you get things done to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
And so finding those two rhythms, they don't always correlate to when your brain is at its best.
Yeah, well, even in those times when I'm really having to knuckle in and get something accomplished, I have to take a mental break. I have to go do something menial,
Right.
Go check on the garden, go do something, have a snack, let my brain kind of relax for a moment, and then jump back into it. And that's a frequent thing for me. At least every hour, if I'm really having to dig deep and finish something, every hour or more, I need to take a little break, take a little recharge, let my brain relax a little bit before I can jump back into it.
And I think for you, even that timeline is really long that you can work and then have to take a small break. Like I've seen you get projects done that have taken days straight. Even I think we may have even mentioned this in the last podcast whenever you were building this bathroom literally right over here, and it was 48 hours, right?
40 hours.
40 hours of straight work, right?
So manual labor is different. I can just put my head down and get the manual labor done, but that wasn't as creative. There's a little bit of thinking through tile cuts,
right.
But I kind of had that planned out. So it wasn't so much creativity as it was repetition,
and productivity.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm stacking bricks, I don't stack bricks, but I can just I don't need to think. But those haptic movements for me, they help my brain. If I'm doing something menial, that's another way of helping my brain think and helping the creativity go.
Even like the actual way you can feel the things that you're moving and stuff helps your brain keep moving. That's cool. And maybe even looking at the fact that our brain works similarly to the way our muscles even do, right? Is that there's times of extreme focus, like with the anaerobic energy system with your muscles, where you're doing a time of like extreme strength, and it can't last forever. Yeah. Whereas if it's a time of less, like an aerobic energy system, like a runner, someone who can do something for hours straight, it's usually less intensive, and yet still is getting a task done, right? There's two different ways you can go about it. So if you do something that takes extreme focus, then you have to take an extreme break.
Yep.
And that's usually the way I'm wired.
The ebb and flow, absolutely.
Yeah. Whereas if you do something that is a little easier, you could do that for a very long time. Even your subconscious can do things forever. Your brain, certain parts of your brain are connected to forcing or making your heart beat, and you don't even have control of that. And that's your brain working and doing that forever, keeping you alive. And so there's certain endurance portions of your brain that take less rest afterwards. And yet, no matter what, at the end of the day, we have to sleep.
Yep.
Which is kind of crazy to think about.
It's important. Well, so I want to wrap this up by just circling around to the source of creativity, which is God, and truly like knowing God and enjoying His creation is a source of inspiration, because you look at so many inventions now, like Nike invented a swimsuit that they had to ban from competition because it gave people a competitive edge. Wow. But they ripped off the design from a shark skin. They took it from God. And then the B-2 bomber is patterned after the shape of a peregrine falcon. And more we're seeing design patterned after what God has created. And as they do, it's like, wow, we've come up with something next level.
I want to interrupt you. Is that why the B-2 bomber has like a falcon painted on the front of it, usually on the nose?
No, the B-2 bomber is not. It's like a stealth paint. So you're thinking of more like maybe like a B-52 bomber, like an
that's actually exactly B-52 is exactly what I'm thinking of. Yeah. The one with just a thick set of wings with the double jets on each side. That must be. I think that is a B-52. I had a model of it whenever I was a kid. I'm trying, but anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
I think the B-52s were prop, but I'd have to double check.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can double check on that, but mid-1900s. Well, awesome. Yeah, so we encourage you, like, knowing God is ultimately He's created us. He's creative, but He's created us to be creative, and so tapping into the ultimate source. I mean, ultimately, that's for us. That's way more important than being creative on Ninja obstacles and anything else we do. But He's our inspiration. He's our source, and you got to know Him.
And I'd say knowing Him helps you be creative in other things, like the way you can show people appreciation and love other people, and helps you be creative in the ways you can serve. And really, I'd say enriches your life in more ways than one, because creativity requires a focus on something other than yourself. And that's exactly what God calls us to do.
Yeah. And the last thing God wants us to do is to elevate what He's created above Him, right? To idolize, hey, I love nature, but I don't want anything to do with the creator of nature.
Right.
And I'm a bird watcher, or I love waterfalls, but those things are designed to help us enjoy, but so that enjoyment might reflect back onto the giver of those things. Even when we have good food, it's like it should reflect into gratitude to God, who has given someone creativity and who has given us variety in bell peppers and tomatoes and meats and different things that we can combine to make good food. It should reflect back in enjoyment and appreciation on God, who could have just given us a stomach that opens and we put in nutrition tablets and go. But he didn't have to give us the ability to smell and to taste and to feel different textures.
Right.
But he did. And so that should reflect in gratitude back to him, who's enabled us to be creative and to enjoy creativity.
I think that's really the main thing we're trying to say this whole time, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks for joining us. And as a reminder, you can find us on Spotify, on Anchor, on Apple Podcasts, on Google, on Amazon, pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. And as always, it helps us so much if you would share, if you like, if you subscribe, leave a rating and review, and help us get the word out.
Thanks for joining us on the Bergstrom Bunch podcast. See you guys next time.